If you want any background, I started getting to storytelling in 2013 after taking a class at Ollie. And I've just enjoyed every bit of storytelling. In fact, I teach classes at Weaverville and at Ollie, produce these classes, and I'm about to tell the story. I was a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout for about a month. And there was one thing about scouting, it was almost a religious thing in scouting that I had trouble with. It's called camping. And it's against my religion, literally. And let me share a hymn with you from a hymnal that talks about this. And it goes something like this. If your sleeping bag is tilting, you will see me at the Hilton, because Jews don't camp, la, 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 oh, la, la, la. I said Jews don't camp. So my now 41-year-old son was in the second grade, and he was about to join Cub Scouts. So the parents had to go to the organizational meeting. They were pleading, they were asking for volunteers. And in my spirit of volunteering, I kind of went like this, hoping they wouldn't see me. And fortunately, the first call was for den mothers. Great. So I'm next to Drew, my son, looking like this. And then I heard the word. They wanted a cub master. I'd been married for 11 years. I finally had a chance to be a master of something. And like an idiot, I raised my hand, and I was the Cub Master of Pack 177 for 8 years, 2 sons. And they love to go camping, yeah. Well, I managed to escape most of that. And then my son was going to graduate from Cub Scouts and cross the bridge into Boy Scouts. And like his father, he crossed over on a very shaky bridge because he only lasted a month. But before he was crossing over the bridge, my assistant Cub Master, I'll just call him Eagle Scout Teddy, said to me, how would you and Drew like to join me and Teddy, Junior Eagle Scout, on a camping trip to the Boundary Waters on the coast, on the border of Minnesota and Ontario? And it sounded like, oh, damn, camping? And then I looked in my son's eyes and I just realized this is going to be a bonding experience like none other. So I said, count us in. What an idiot. So the next day, Eagle Scout invites us over to his house to show us the gear that we're going to need. Now I'm thinking camping, it's not a big deal. We'll have a nice cabin. We'll have little beds, good food, bathrooms. It's going to be great. Get there and he says, oh, by the way, we're going on the Canadian side where all they have is land. You got to bring everything else. And he went down the list. The first thing, well, we had our own sleeping bags and tent. Yeah, I know, it was a leftover. So we didn't need that. And then he showed me something, I call it faux food. Dehydrated sand. Add water, heat it up, and you got hot, wet sand. That was going to be our food. So, okay, no cabin, no food. And then I look over, I see a rope, a long rope. Hey, Eagle Scout, what's the rope for? Well, you know, there's bears out there, and we have to put our food at the end of the rope, throw it over a limb so that bears don't get to our food. Bears? And then I see a plastic thing. I don't know, it kind of looked like like something you would use for transfusions. And it had a little tube coming out of it. Hey, Eagle Scout, what's that for? Oh, that's your shower. That's your shower? Yeah, you hang it from a tree and the water comes out. Oh, yeah, right. And then finally, I see a couple of shovels, telescopic shovels that you kind of extend out. So I said, hey, Eagle Scout, is this for putting out the campfires? He said, well, yeah, you could use that, but it's really for digging your latrine. So you can dig it and then cover it up. Talk about deep doo-doo. So the next day we headed up. Eagle Scout had the canoes on the car, and we headed up to beautiful Ely, Minnesota, the starting point for the hike, and it's just a beautiful little town. But we were there to hitch a ride on a pontoon boat to go a half an hour over to the Canadian side, where the Canadian Ranger gave us a map, registered us, and Eagle Scout said, "Oh, I've been here 4 or 5 times. I have the map, but I really don't need it." Yeah, right. So off we went. And it was our first night, so we just had to find a campsite. And we did. And the first thing we did is we had our hot, wet sand for dinner. I snuck a couple of M&Ms and Heath bars and all kinds of good stuff. So after all that, Drew and I went to our sleeping bag and our tent and settled in for the night. The first morning, whoa, you have to basically exhaust your exhaust, which meant I had to dig that latrine. And I'm pretty proud. I'll dig it. Everything's in it. It's fine. Eagle Scout comes over and says, "It's not deep enough." So I had to re-dig it, dig it deeper. And again, talk about deep doo-doo. Boom, there we are. So I take a shower. I think I'm taking a shower. I look at that bag. I turn the little nozzle. About 15 drops came out. It was a monsoon of disappointment. It cleaned my pinky. Now, we also identified the Minnesota state bird when we were on that part of the hike, the mosquito. And as prepared as we weren't, we just spent a lot of time in the water because of those skeeters. But after the first day, we took off for the second day. And if you have never been to the Boundary Waters, they are absolutely beautiful. It's like a blue dream with ripples on top, surrounded by natural trees, and they're just absolutely beautiful. So we're going off on day number 2. Eagle Scout finds a place he's been to before. I call it the Jumping Off Rock. It's about 30 feet high. You take your canoes. I don't know what you do with the canoe. You park them down at the bottom, and we climbed up to take our jump off the cliff, which we did. I was the last one. Make that a falling Walenda. I jumped in the lake, and right below was a rock. The good news is the rock and Chucky were fine. We just kept on going. And we're going from lake to lake, beauty to beauty. I see happy paddlers here and there, and they see my happy look. And then we have to portage, or as normal people would say, portage. Now, I thought portaging meant you carried your canoe about 30 feet, you put it back in, all was fine. Nah, baba, nah. It was a mile and a quarter of mud. So I'm schlepping the canoe and the Army duffel bag. Drew tried to help a little bit. He was 11 years old. He carried about 30 feet. And I'm schlepping through the mud to get to the other side, where we had lunch. More of that hot, sandy crap. But that reminded me of another verse of the biblical song. If it hasn't got a kitchen and it isn't air conditioned, where's the exit ramp? Da 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 da. Because Jews don't camp. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we had to put up with non-air conditioning and that freeze-dried crap. But off we went. And this was to be our last day. And we found, last full day, we found a beautiful, small little pond. It was glistening. The water was like a diamond sparkling on the sunlight. We're on the Canadian side. I look up, and soaring like hang gliders, 2 bald eagles. I was so proud to be an American at that point in Canada. And then we saw the bird that gave this little pond its name. Oh! Oh! Let's call it the loon. It was Lake Loon. And there were no Looney Tunes that night. The next morning, we got up and were prepared to go back to the Canadian side, thank God, and away from camping. And we're starting out. It's kind of a beautiful sky. It turns a little gray about 11 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock, it turns really gray. And by 1 o'clock, it was like a black hole that was consuming everything. The winds were gusting. The rain was coming down. It wasn't coming down in buckets. It was coming down in bathtubs. It was so heavy rain. It was incredible. And we looked around. We needed to get to some island. And over there was a small little rock island. So kind of like Cub Scouts on fire, we headed over to that little island. We parked our canoes, or whatever you do with a canoe. And then we climbed up to the rock. And I realized at this point, we didn't need no stinking rope. There were no bears. There had been a drought the year before. But now I wanted to take that rope, and I wanted to find old Eagle Scout and say, thanks for sending me to my impending doom. And we tied down the post of the tent, and we made them really taut. And the wind was just whirling like it was a hurricane. And the rain was beating down. And Drew and I, we finally get in that tent. And we're not in the sleeping bags. We're on the ground. And the tent is shaking. And the wind is voracious. The rain is pouring down. I look into my son's eyes. And I see his fear. Or was it my eyes reflecting off of his eyes? I don't know. But we were both scared, hopeless. Or something like that. And this was around 11 o'clock, and it's just going like crazy. And then 1 o'clock, everything's quiet. Hardly a sound. We didn't want to go outside to check it out. But we went to sleep that night. And we woke up the next morning. Eagle Scout and little junior Eagle Scout are already out there packing up their gear, getting ready to go. And we had our breakfast, this time of Twix, M&Ms, and Heath bars. And we took off for the Canadian takeout, which was about an hour away. I knew we couldn't make it the night before, but old Eagle Scout thought we could make it to the Canadian side. Well, we did the next morning. And when we checked in, we told the Canadian Ranger where we were. And he said, let me check this out. And he looked on a map. He said, oh my God, you guys are lucky to be alive. A tornado touched down 1/4 mile from where you were. So we took off, heading back to Cincinnati, but there was one more stop. I told Eagle Scout, you got to pull over here. And I took my tent, I took my sleeping bags, and I threw it in the dump. Because part of my tradition taught to me in my youth. After 40 years in the desert, the 11th commandment says, go to sleep under a roof. Because Jews don't camp, and this retired old Cub Master definitely don't camp at all. Thank you. Come on up. David, come on up. Joe, Nancy, come on up.